This is Killer Innovations, a show about ideas, creativity, and how you can innovate. Welcome to the Innovator's Garage, where you learn to create your next game-changing killer innovation.
Hello, I'm Phil McKinney. Before we jump into today's episode, I wanted to let you know that we are taking a few weeks away from the studio to work on a whole new batch of shows. In the meantime, we are reaching back into the 14-year archive and bringing you some of our most popular shows from the past. Enjoy.
On April 4th, 2008, Phil McKinney, Vice President and Chief Technology Officer of the Personal Systems Group at Hewlett-Packard, delivered the morning keynote speech at the 5th Annual Business Alliance Bootcamp for Growing Companies and Entrepreneurs at the McLean Hilton in Tysons Corner, Virginia. And now, recorded before a live audience, here is Phil McKinney.
What I'm going to do today is just give you a little bit of at least my perspective on a little bit of the economic challenges, but also try to encourage you in thinking a little bit differently about how to create value. After Intelligent and before I was recruited out of HP, I kind of went into a little bit of a semi-retirement, was doing a bunch of angel investing. So you get a little bit different perspective when you're putting your own money on the table versus putting other people's money on the table. So 10, 20, 30. I always hate coming to these kinds of events and you get somebody up on stage who's not going to pontificate long past the time value that they deliver. So what's 10, 20, 30? This is my promise to you. 10 slides, 20 minutes, and nothing less than a 30-point font. Okay? So let's get started. Knowledge is becoming a commodity. This may not be earth-shattering for some of you. If it is earth-shattering for you, you may have a career problem. Let's face it. We've seen it happening with the outsourcing activities. You know, with tech jobs going overseas and the role of being able to take advantage of labor arbitrage to find new opportunities to reduce your overall costs. And we thought it would stop with just those kinds of jobs, the IT, the call centers, offshore manufacturing from the standpoint of building things. We'll ship that overseas. Now you've got medical. Odds are that if you get a second opinion on an X-ray, 80% of all second opinions on X-rays now occur outside the US. They send those images overseas. Now you've got legal. A lot of law firms now are sending out the background and preliminary work, the original drafting of work, to come back for final review and editing by the local legal team within the given country. And then also the accounting. So it's not stuck with just task jobs such as writing code, etc. It's moving now to the point where if you have a skill that can be taught at a university, your job is at risk. Your business is at risk. Because that is quickly becoming commoditized out. Very good universities all over the world. In fact, right now, if you had to ask me where the best software engineering resources and expertise are anywhere in the world, I would tell you Brazil. By far, the best code quality coming out of any part of the world today is coming out of Brazil. Not the US, not India, it's Brazil. So it's no longer about cost either. Very good universities, very good skills, but it is becoming very, very commoditized. Now the impact on this is everywhere. Just take a look at the Dow 30. Now the original Dow, created in 1896, was made up of 12 companies. As you know now, it's made up of the Dow 30, key index to measuring the health of the overall stock market. How many companies were part of the original 12 and is still on the Dow today? One. GE. Now, reality, GE has fallen off the Dow twice. It was taken off the Dow and put back on. Why? What's the difference between GE and every other company that was on the Dow? They weren't able to transform themselves through the transitions. Think about what life was here in the US in the late 1800s, 1900s. Heavily agricultural. So the original Dow was made up of companies that we long no longer exist. And yes, there was one company that was on the original Dow that made buggy whips. Okay? But you think about the transitions from an agricultural to a manufacturing economy to a knowledge economy, the ability to make those transformations. Only one company has survived making those transformations and remained on the Dow. Now, if you follow the Dow, you know recently there was actually an additional trade-offs where more oil companies have come onto the Dow. Actually, one went on, one came off. But more tech companies have been going on to the Dow. So that's a transformation from an agricultural to a manufacturing to a knowledge economy. Now, my argument here is that the creative economy is here. We're past the knowledge economy. Knowledge is quickly becoming a commodity. What's the new thing? The new thing is this creative economy. Think about it. In the early 1980s, the market value for companies listed on the stock exchanges, 95% of the value of that stock was book value. 20 years later, 23% of the market value is book value. So in 20 years, a major fundamental shift on how companies get valued. So what makes up that difference? It's all the intangibles. And I would argue that one of the key pieces of increasing of that intangible value is the role of creativity and innovation. It's the value of ideas. It's no longer about what you can do with your hands or what you can do from a machine. It's the ability to continually generate new ideas, new products, new services. And if you look at it, you recognize there's a lot of companies who've not been able to do that. And what happens? They don't survive. I guess I can't emphasize this enough that for countries, economic stability going forward is the ability to have ideas being able to be continually generated from within the organization. You may ship off to have the things actually manufactured or built or code written, but it's the ability to generate those ideas. Now, innovation is important, and I always get into this question when I'm talking with CEOs who want to start their innovation teams. I always love the one activity that a lot of companies go through is they appoint a chief innovation officer, thinking that's going to solve their innovation problem. You know, as I was sharing with Mark this morning, you know, I have the benefit and the joy and also a little bit of the stress of reporting to two of the executive vice presidents at HP, Shane Robinson, who is the chief strategy and chief technology officer for all of HP, and then Todd Bradley, who actually is the EVP who runs the personal systems group, which is HP's PC division. And you always get this where companies want to come in and they want to pitch. Well, they always want to pitch to Todd Bradley or Shane or Mark Hurd. And I have to keep reminding them that, and this is not unique to HP, it's unique to any company, right? As you get higher, as I jokingly say, as you get higher in an organization, the less oxygen there is. And the fact of the matter is that there's a little bit of reality distortion between what the CEOs and the leaders of companies think is important and what actually is getting executed and implemented through the main part of the organization. So you think about innovation. Innovation is important. Go out and do a survey. Booz Allen does an annual survey on innovation for the top companies. 86% of the CEOs admit and will be right there with you that innovation is key to their business, right? And they'll even boast about how good they are at innovating. But when you ask them the next question about, skill sets of their employees, approaches, methodologies, structured processes to create innovations? 0. In fact, I think it went from 80+% thinking it's important, less than 10% have any formal process to innovate within their organization. Big gap between I know it's important, but I'm not making the investments. I'm not training my people. I'm not putting the systems in place to go make innovations happen within my organization. We'll be right back after this break. You're listening to Killer Innovations on the BizTalk Radio Network. This is one that's also a little controversial, and this is my strong belief, is that creativity is not a gift. It's not bestowed on people. It's not, okay, God blessed you with the skill of creativity and you don't have it. It's a skill that anybody can learn, anybody can practice, and anybody can become proficient at. It ignores age, demographics, education levels, and geography. It doesn't care. It's the ability to put your own thought process in place to be able to come up with the next idea, that next product, that next service. Mark shared a little bit about the podcast. The podcast started about 3 years ago as a way for me to share a little bit about how I personally do the creativity innovations to come up with products, but more importantly, how to get your organization to change. How do you change a culture? In my case, I'm trying to change a culture of a company that has 160,000 employees in 180 countries and 104 billion in revenue. You know, it can be done, and it's being done. But the challenge here is a lot of people have self-pessimism on that, oh, I don't have it. I'm not creative. That it is, some special gift that somebody else has, and I don't have it. That is not the case. Give me a little bit of time, an hour or two with anybody in this room, and you will walk out of that couple of hours with a new perspective on your own ability to come up with killer ideas, things that are fundamentally going to change your business, change your industry. It's not magic. A lot of books are out there. You read the books, you get done with the book, and you go, I don't get it. They tell you the what, but not the how. And the how is not that hard. The fact is that we are creative creatures. We were created to create. Perfect example for those of us who are parents in here, think back to your own kids when they were little. Think about how many ways they could come up with a toy use of a toilet paper roll. Right? You're amazed. They can turn it into a bat. They can turn it into a gun. They can turn it into a ball they throw around. They can turn it into a silo in their little play farm. Kids have an amazing ability to look at normal objects and turn them into their own world creative applications. The problem is that through the process of our educational systems and through jobs, we literally beat that creativity out of our people. Go into a kindergarten class and ask how many students want to be artists, musicians. They want to be in the creative skills, designers. You go ask a kindergarten class, every kid's raising their waving their hand, yeah, that's what I want to be. Now, go to the first grade class, the second grade class, all the way through high school. By the time you get to that senior in high school, and you ask how many kids want to be in that creative space, you might get one kid who might raise their hand, right? And let's face it, as parents, we try to point our kids in some cases. Oh, we want you to become a doctor. We want you to become a lawyer. We want you to become an accountant. We want you to become an engineer. Well, what did I say at the beginning of the speech? That's becoming a commodity. It's about how do we bring back that kind of creativity that we see in those kids and bring it back to day-to-day lives? How do we bring it back from the standpoint of being able to go off and create the next great things? Now, in reality, we all want to be creative. You know, we want to be the trendsetters. It's cool to be the trendsetter. It's cool to be the guy that came up with that really great product that's on the front page of magazines. You know, it's cool to be the founder of a startup that, you know, makes it big because everybody's using your product or using your technology. It's not okay to be classified as traditional, conservative, right? And we all sit around this room and say, well, you know, my role and what I do, I'm kind of in this role. There's other people in my organization that come up with the products right. Wrong. It's everybody's role and everybody's jobs to bring creativity to whatever it is you do. You know, in fact, in my role as running the innovation program office, some of the best sources of ideas that I get for some of the products come from the executive assistants and the cooks in the HP cafeteria. Why? Because they're not biased about technology. They don't automatically put a filter on by the fact that I'm a hardware engineer and I know what the limitations of hardware are, so I'll apply that filter to confine the creativity. They have no perspective. You know? In fact, there's one guy who works in the HP cafeteria in Cupertino who's a regular source. I can't make it through the cafeteria line without getting another idea from him. It's the ability to take those filters off and get a different perspective. Stupid wins. This actually goes back. There's a gentleman in the back, Mike Stutz. Stutz and I have known each other for a long time. We had this conversation many years ago about old think and new think. Right? What's old think? Old think is when most corporations you're coming up with an idea and you're getting really wacky about the idea, and all of a sudden you go, oh, you put the filter up and you go, oh, that sounds a little too crazy, so I'm going to go safe. I'm going to bring this thing down because I'm going to apply my years of expertise, my college degrees. I've worked hard to get to my position. If it looks too crazy, I'm going to risk my position. And so we go with this old think. We crank it down. Reality is that with new think, it's all about how do you break those perspectives? How do you come out and recognize the fact of these filters you apply every day when you're trying to come up with something? We put these filters in place that actually restrict and confine our ability to come up with new ideas. The reality is the best ideas will sound stupid. If they don't sound stupid, then guess what? You're probably not pushing the envelope hard enough. So in my mind, stupid wins. We should all aspire to come up and create stupid ideas. And how many stupid ideas have you come up with? And if you're not coming up with stupid ideas, try harder. So, fire plus Poe. And Poe is not Jack Black's Panda and Kung Fu Panda, albeit I've already seen the movie, because we do a lot of work with DreamWorks. Phenomenal movie. You got to go see it. What do I mean by fire? I'm going to give you a little peek behind the curtain on a very simple methodology that you can apply to come up with ideas. Now, I don't have enough time because I promised to keep this to the 10, 20, 30 rule. For those of you who've seen me speak before, I'm very good on the 10 slides and the 30-point font. I'm not very good on the 20 minutes. We'll be right back after this break. You're listening to Killer Innovations on the BizTalk Radio Network. So what does fire or Poe mean? Fire. F, focus. How do you bring focus to where you're going to innovate? The worst thing you can do is bring people together or yourself and say, let's come up with a new product. What kind of focus is that? If you go out onto the site, there's a list of areas, or what we call focus areas, that you look at from the standpoint. So do you look at changing the supply chain? Do you look at changing the value chain to the product? Do you change the way you serve new customers? Do you change the development of new products? So F is pick an area of focus. I, ideation. Coming up, how do you actually generate ideas? The most common problem with current processes is the fact that you ask simple questions. If you ask simple questions, you get simple answers. So you get into a room, you put 10 of the smartest people you got in the room, you say, come up with a new product. Go. What happens through that process? Well, the human brain says that as soon as I answer the question, what do? You stop answering it. It's like the old analogy of you lost your car keys. I love it when people always say, you go hunt around the keys, where'd you find it? Oh, I found it the last place I looked. Well, who keeps looking past the time you found the keys? The same applies to your coming up with ideas. You ask a simple question. As soon as the mind gets to the point of answering the question, you stop. Is that the best idea? I'm willing to bet you a nice dinner it's not. But how do you push yourself? It's about asking better questions, not open-ended questions like come up with a better product, but questions like, what is it that my customer does not like about the way that they buy my product today? What makeshifts does a customer apply to my product to make it useful? And could I take those makeshifts and put them into my product? Coming up with questions that force you to get beyond the obvious. Now, I can't go through all the questions, but there's about 70 questions that I put out there that you can apply that help you get beyond the obvious. The R, ranking. So now you do these sessions, you come up with 200 ideas. Go to senior management and try to get 200 ideas through the process. You're lucky if you get one a year through the process. So what's the best one? What is the ranking mechanism? And I'm going to give you really quick the ranking mechanism that I use. So anybody in here who's now, who wants to come pitch HP on the world's next innovation that you think HP either ought to buy your company or we ought to partner with you, you're now going to get some unique insight on how I rank ideas. 5 questions. You must be able to answer yes to one of the first 3. First question. Will this idea fundamentally change the customer's experience or expectation? If it delivers the same experience, the same expectation as somebody else, not interested. Second, will this change the competitive landscape? Will this reposition your company, my company, company you're going to start? Does this give you some unique competitive advantage, some kind of competitive positioning? Do you create a barrier to competitive entry? Right? Third, does this fundamentally change the economics of the industry? Can I change the value chain in such a way that I radically change the value the customer receives and therefore inject your way into that value chain? If you can't answer yes to at least one of those 3, then why are you doing it? So if you can answer yes to one of those 3, then there's 2 final questions. Do you have a contribution to make? HP, $104 billion in revenue, 600 PhD researchers in HP labs, 160,000 employees, $15 billion in cash. We can go do lots of things, right? But if someone said, let's go and get into the oil industry, very profitable business, by the way, HP doesn't have a contribution to make in that space. So what's the contribution? How is it aligned with what you're doing? And last but not least is, will this generate sufficient margin? It's all about, either you're a business or a charity. And Mr. Hurd has made it quite clear what business we are in at HP. We are not a charity. And all of you, I'm assuming, are not also in charities. It's about business. It's about how are you going to return margin to your shareholders and deliver value to your customers. So does it generate sufficient margin? Last, on the E, execution. Execute, execute, execute. It's easy to come up with the ideas, well, easier to come up with ideas, but it's all about the execution. And execution is where it falls down. I'm a big believer in gate milestones, mapping for managing innovation, and with gated funding models. If you go back and you look at history and you look at teams that were given a whole block of money and told to go off on their own and come up with something big out of the back end, the likelihood of success on that kind of a model is like darn near zero, right? We are big believers in a gated funding model. You get a little bit of money, get through, validate the market, get money. Validate the customer, get some customers' understanding of the product, get some customer excitement, next funding gate. Do a limited launch, get it in the market, next funding gate. If it doesn't work, that's fine. We tried. We take those monies and start other programs. So what does PO stand for? PO is 2 fundamental skills that you should do each and every day, irrespective of running what I call the fire process. P, perspective. You need to be able to change your perspective. I've talked a lot about these filters and how you apply these filters. Let me give you a little example. What is half of 13? 6.5, right? Wrong, because you made the assumption of what I meant by half. Half of 13 could be 6 or 7, depending on rounding. It could be I took the numbers 1 and 3 and split them in half, so the half is 1 and 3. If you take Roman numeral 13 and do a horizontal line, it's Roman numeral 8 and 8. If you take the word 13 spelled out, split it in half. The point I'm trying to make here is that whenever we ask a question, we make assumptions on the meanings. When I said, what's the half of 13, we thought we already knew the answer. And we've been taught in school that there's one answer. There's always more than one answer. Changing perspective is looking for the non-obvious. Changing your perspective. And that's what gives you the insight and breakthroughs on understanding what your end customers' unspoken needs and unspoken wants are. O, observation skills. This is the one thing that drives my wife bananas. And actually, she's here in Virginia. We used to live here. In fact, I just sold my house out in Fauquier County. But my daughter and son-in-law live here, so I'm actually spending the weekend here visiting family. And actually, she was going to come watch me speak, and I actually asked her not to. Because otherwise, I feel self-conscious using her as an example. And then I also pay for it later in the process. But in this case of the observation skills is what do every Saturday you'll find me standing in a Best Buy, a Circuit City, a Fry's Electronics. Why? Because that's where my products are purchased. What am I doing? I'm watching customers. I'm watching how they buy my products, my competitors' products, every weekend. Drives my wife nuts. We're driving down, if you know San Jose, there's a Best Buy on Santana Row. Now I'm tagged there. They know who I am, so I have to go to I have to start rotating around a little bit. They know who I am. But it's interesting on the observation. So, standing in the TV department, and now some of you guys and ladies are gonna really relate to this, right? Standing in the TV aisle, watching a husband and wife buy a TV. The guy standing there, and what's he doing? Oh, it's a 1080p, it's got 4 HDMI inputs, it's a 5 millisecond refresh on the display, this is the best TV. What does the wife say? It doesn't match the furniture. Who wins the argument? The wife, right? You know, and this is part of the challenge and insights of who do you build the product for? Everybody thinks TVs, big TVs, football, you sell to guys. No. You're selling to the women. And you better understand what the buy decisions are, on how, in my case, how my customers buy my product. It's those kinds of observation skills, the non-obvious. It's not something you can do in a focus group. It's not something you can do in a survey. It's getting up out of your chair, getting out there, and seeing how your customers actually use your product. We'll be right back after this break. You're listening to Killer Innovations on the BizTalk Radio Network. This week, we are reaching deep into the archive and bringing you one of our most downloaded shows. Enjoy. The Innovators Network is proud to announce a new podcast we launched called 5 Minutes to New Ideas. The show is designed for the creative mind with a short attention span. Each episode is designed to quickly challenge you to look beyond the obvious and to reveal game-changing ideas by asking unique, funny, and yes, sometimes crazy questions. You can find the new show, 5 Minutes to New Ideas, on iTunes or wherever you find your podcast, and over at tonewideas.com. Ideas without execution are a hobby. I run into people all the time that says, wow, I came up with that idea for Facebook first. So what? You didn't execute. Oh, I came up with the idea for Google. So what? It doesn't matter who came up with the idea first, it's who executes. It's all about the execution. How do you take the ideas and deliver them into the marketplace? In my opinion, ideas are the new, and you can fill in the blank, the new gold, the new oil, the new diamonds, whatever. People's individual career success is going to be in their own individual ability to participate in the creative economy. When you've got almost north of 80% of company values today in 2008 being based on intangible value, and creativity innovation has a role in that, what are you contributing to those intangible values that your company is creating that's going to get a return back from those investors? And in my opinion, this is fundamentally going to shift the control point of how people actually even get compensated. Companies are suffering today on a huge innovation gap. The need and desire for innovations and the lack of good ideas to go execute. We need them to survive, but we don't have them. And this is where actually the small businesses have a huge role. Just couple quick interesting statistics. In the case of small businesses here in the US, small businesses are the most prolific patenters in the entire segment in the US. Patents per employees. Small businesses are 14 times higher than any other segment of the marketplace. And I'm not a big believer of patents being actually equivalent to innovation, but I'm using it as a proxy here. Small businesses, 14 times. Now, a very important metric in patenting work that I look at is what we call the most cited patents, which means value. Patents that are highly referenced by other patents or highly referenced in other materials are high-value patents. If you look at the top 1% of the cited patents today in the US, it is 2 times more likely that it's a small business patent, not a large patent from an HP, an IBM, or somebody else. That says that the most important work, the most important innovations that are being created are coming from small businesses. Yes, HP were big. But I can tell you right now, in the innovation pipeline that I manage on behalf of all of HP, 40% of the innovations that are in that pipeline come from outside of HP, and I'll be taking that number to almost 50% this year. And a majority of that is coming from small businesses, not large businesses. So it's the ability to generate ideas, because ideas are the new gold. They are the new oil. They are the new diamonds. They are the new cash. And companies and economies are going to be dependent on creating an environment where people can bring their creativity skills each and every day to create value for the business, and create jobs, create economic stability, and put all the economies back on growth, on the growth curves. And with that, I thank you for your time. This episode is sponsored by the Killer Question Card Deck, a card deck of 40 unique and proven questions that will help you come up with game-changing innovations. It's literally a brainstorm in a box. Now, why is this different from other creativity tools? While other approaches tend to result in normal, incremental, obvious ideas, this questioning approach will take you beyond the obvious and help you brainstorm breakthrough ideas. The killer questions are available at Amazon and over at innovation.tools. Thanks for taking the time out of your busy schedule to join in. If you have any comments or suggestions, drop me a note at phil@killerinnovations.com. Beyond this show, I write about my personal experiences of being in the innovation game for the last 2 decades. Topics include innovation, creativity, culture, team building, metrics, frustrations, leadership, and how to win. You can find that content over at philmckinney.com. You can also find out information about my book, Beyond the Obvious, including extensive excerpts over at beyondtheobvious.com. You can find hardcover, digital, and audio versions of my book on Amazon or wherever you get your books from. Now, the reason I started this show back in 2005 was to pay back my early mentor. My first mentor, Bob Davis, invested an immense amount of time in training and coaching me, which had a major impact on my career. When I went back and asked him how I could pay him back, he laughed and said I couldn't. I had to pay it forward. If I could ask for a favor, could you help me pay it forward? How? 1, by giving us a rating wherever you get your podcast, as that helps spread the word. And 2, by telling others about the show. If you want to be part of the conversation between the shows, I hang out in the Innovators community on Slack. The Innovators community is a private community of vetted innovators who help each other succeed. Check it out at theinnovators.community. This episode of Killer Innovations was produced by the Innovators Network. You can find the show notes and the entire show catalog going back to 2005 at killerinnovations.com. I'll talk to you next week, and in the meantime, go out and change the world with your killer innovation. Bye-bye.